Hi there. Welcome to Managing Capacity, Empowering Team Members with Visibility in Your PM Tool. I am Melissa Morris. I am the founder and lead consultant at Agency Authority. We help overwhelmed agency owners streamline their agencies, start maximizing their team, increasing productivity with the ultimate goal of increasing profits. With me today, I have Karen Cummings. She is the CEO and founder of Radiant Marketing. She is a previous client and friend, and I'm going to pass it to her now to share a little bit more about the work they're doing over at Radiant.
Hi, thank you, Melissa. I'm so excited to be here. I loved working with you, so I just want to open with that. But my name's Karen. I'm the founder and CEO, like you said, of Radiant Marketing. We are a dispersed team across the country, and we work primarily with health and wellness brands on quality lead generation and progression. So we have a few um, health tech companies, wellness brands, and e-commerce companies in the health space.
Awesome. Well, I've started doing these over the last couple months and just thinking about a lot of the challenges that I see many agency owners face. One of which was using their project management tool. And a lot of agency owners will come to me, and there's often lots of struggles about, I know I'm not using it effectively. I don't think I'm using it to the best of my ability. Is this even the right tool? They start to have concerns of, is it my offers? Is it my team? Like, something just doesn't really feel like it's driving. And then there's this overwhelm of, do I need to change tools? That feels like a really heavy lift. And so one of the things that we did while we were working together is we did make some changes. So you and your team use Asana, and we made some changes. And so I'd love for you just to share how over the course of the time that we worked together, we were just making little tweaks and changes, minor improvements here and there, but the impact that you have found over time that these changes have had on the agency.
Yeah, so you and I were chatting about this right before we signed on here. And I just want to first share how before before we talk about like the specific changes within a project management tool, I think the work that you did with us that was the most powerful was kind of a cultural mindset shift around how we look at process and how we
Mhm.
organize the team, and of course, like what we're trying to accomplish. I think it mirrors, the work that we do with our clients when we're trying to automate, and create, set up their CRM system, their marketing automation. Before we automate, we want to make sure we have a good foundation in place. So I think the
Mhm.
work that we did together, and creating some of the, starting to think through like our processes, what that flow should look like, and what our, ultimate goal with each of these tasks or processes is, but also as an agency and as a team, really guides those more tactical kind of project
Mhm.
management changes, which as as you know, and most agencies or anyone using project management tools knows, like are kind of constantly evolving. So if it's rooted in those first things, then I think those constant evolutions are fine and are helping you get to, where you want to be versus like just kind of constantly changing things, at
Yes.
random.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up. And that probably is like a really good place to start too, because that is something, as you mentioned, that we did a lot of work around. And I do this with a lot of my clients, is just really thinking first, let's think about the workflow, let's think about high level, because that really does influence what ends up in your project management tool. And when you have done the work to consider, okay, what is in this offer? What does that look like? What are the deliverables? Really, how are we going to move this through the team? Then it really offers a lot of clarity on what now just very practically needs to be a task line item in Asana or ClickUp or whatever project management tool you're using. And so I'm glad that you found that useful. And it sounds like that has continued then to support you, even beyond our working time together to continue. You shared a story, just before we hopped on about how you have this service offering, you were putting it in and thought, wait a second, I need to adjust these. But I think now you probably feel a little bit more empowered to make those changes and get those implemented in Asana. Does that feel true?
Yeah, and one of the things that that we talked about that you helped us put in place was like the custom properties. So that kind of speaks to like understanding the process and the goal, and then realizing, oh, like Asana doesn't have, by default the pieces, all of the pieces that we need. So building in those custom properties really help to show our process and support our team in the way that we need to be supported, and give our project manager the visibility she needs to see, where projects are at in the process, where we might have some capacity issues, whether in now time or future time. So there was a lot of pieces that like fell into place once we understood, more of those foundational elements.
Right.
And I think that's where too you helped us to create some kind of base templates for our different
Mhm.
programs, and that has been really helpful. And granted, we're still making customizations to the programs that we implement with our clients, but having that template to just apply to a new project has been super helpful. Definitely a time saver, and honestly, it's helping us remember all of the pieces, because when you apply that, you think you've got it all, but already having done that thought, that thinking ahead of time with that template, really helps to make sure you're not missing any pieces and you've got it all linked up. And it's just been a huge time saver for us with those two.
Good. And some of that came too from the work you were doing with your signature programs, really leaning into getting a lot of clarity around those, working on your own framework and standardization of offerings and bringing those into alignment also really lended itself beautifully to getting some solid templates in place. And, I always tell my agency owners, if it can start 80% ready, and even if you have to add in a few tasks or delete a few things out here or there, the opportunity for something getting missed or spending a lot of setup time creating these things from scratch almost every time, it really just saves in the onboarding process. And I love, you mentioned those custom properties that we added. This is something I often recommend agency owners use. And it's like a little bit more information about the task, but I feel like by adding those, we were actually able to reduce the number of tasks you had as well. You often had additional tasks when really a custom property could have told us what was going on with that. Things like send a client, getting approved, back for revisions. We can eliminate a lot of those tasks when we have a custom property. And that's something I often see agency owners initially set their project management tool up with. And by adding that, it can reduce the volume of tasks, which leads to less overwhelm for the entire team and then better visibility for your project manager.
Yeah, I think those statuses and the workflow aspect really helped to streamline and reduce tasks too, where we were looking at, you helped us to better understand, when should a task be multiple tasks versus
Mhm.
a task that kind of moves through certain steps. So can we have kind of two tracks running for this task or this project at the same time, which means we need multiple tasks. But most of the time, you're kind of strategically going through the steps of a project or a task. So looking at it that way helped to reduce the number of tasks and kind of keep us more diligent about our own processes too. So we're not
Mhm.
trying to jump ahead and get too eager about moving things through. Like we're being methodical and intentional about how we're moving through our tasks. So both reducing the number of tasks, but also really kind of holding us to that process. So that was a big change that you helped us to implement too.
So good. Yeah. And I know meetings, which is also what gets a lot of agency owners, is because there's extra tasks or some overwhelm in the project management tool that leads to a lot more internal meetings and discussions, which it just adds to everybody's plate. So getting a more streamlined approach in there, I know also is helping to reduce your time spent in internal meetings.
Yeah, and I think I can't remember where you came into this process or if you helped us to actually implement it, but we do our weekly stand-up call now on Mondays, and we pull up Asana, and that's how we kind of work through what everybody's working on, planning our week. So it's evolved, over time since our work together too, but it like I think you really set in motion a way for us to collaborate more effectively and saving each other time, so we're not hopping on all these separate individual calls,
Mhm.
but we're coming to that call prepared. We know what our list is. We know what's coming for the week, what questions we have. Natalie does a really great job of, conducting those calls and making sure we're paying attention to hours, capacity, client profitability, and just like pulls that all together as we run through those tasks too. So that has been like a huge way, of leveraging leveraging Asana and creating that kind of what we call our, our Radiant Reflections, Radiant weekly stand-up project in Asana too.
Yeah, and Natalie is your project coordinator for those
Yes.
that don't know, and that I know was something she was really hoping for was just a better way to have some visibility over that and be able to pull up and run that down. So I'm really glad to hear that that's still working really well for you and an effective way of managing your meetings.
Yep. Yeah, it's been great.
And something else I know we did a lot of work around were getting those SOPs created and really understanding the difference between an SOP and a best practice document. Do you want to share a little bit just around like kind of the mental shift you had to make on these two pieces and how they have helped?
Yeah, that's a good reminder. So we were talking about this before the call to SOP best practices, but you just you reminded me of how challenging it was to kind of differentiate those two. But once we really got to the place that that was like a an understanding within our whole team, I think it was super helpful. So I'm definitely a process person, so I feel like um, it it wasn't incredibly challenging or I was working against this. I love process, and I think process does help to create an opportunity for creativity too if you've got a nice balance. Um, but I think that defining those processes, creating those SOPs, like in itself was a valuable exercise for the team. Like we each kind of owned various elements of that depending on our our role within the agency. But creating those best practices too, so that we have, like our how we do it here at Radiant,
Mhm.
um, was super effective. And then with that, complementing those processes with the templates and the templates you helped us to create. So we actually have what we call our Radiant Resource Library now that we've, continued to grow and we reference regularly. We use in our employee onboarding. So yeah, that's been huge. And you were a pivotal piece of making that all possible.
Yeah, and it's just a little bit of a shift, right? And you need both. Like there are definitely a time and a place for standard operating procedure, which is very much like this is where you go find it, and this is what you click on, right? And this is how you log in. But those best practice documents, how does Radiant, right? Where is Radiant secret sauce brought into the picture? And that's the stuff that can be hard to train, which then makes delegating difficult. So when you can actually pull that out and think about it in that way, it often leads to better delegation and the agency owner resting a little easier because okay, the team is doing this how we do it around here because they've been trained in that way, and it creates consistency among team members and how they serve their clients. And then, like you said, looping those into Asana so they were really easy to find when that task was getting done, just adds that extra layer of consistency and stability.
Yeah, and we have Tess is our client and team success lead, and she actually kind of owns that resource library. So she's regularly refreshing that. And when we do come across something where we're, maybe having some friction or we're bumping up against a process, we always like to revisit those and make sure that we do have the best process in place. And if not, we modify it. And if we do, then we do like a team training, and so we're like kind of refreshing on, okay, here's how the process goes. This is, why we have it in place like this. And again, if we do make modifications, then that's something that we'll train on or update the team on and say, hey, we made some changes here to this process because of these reasons. But that reminds me, and I don't want to forget to say, one of the things that you really helped us with was kind of prioritizing some of that, right? Because it can feel super overwhelming to be like, how do we create all of our processes for everything we do within our entire agency? So that was really helpful, is like really looking at like what has the highest impact, what are you doing most often, and like chipping away at it in that way. I mean, we still even have some processes that we haven't fully fleshed out that are in our Asana, project
Yeah.
that are waiting to be created because it's just something we don't do often at all. And it's like when it does come up next time, we will be writing a process alongside it. So that was really helpful. And another thing that will like forever stick in my brain too, and I know it's something that other people have said, but I feel like it really resonated when we were working together, is basically if it's not broken, don't fix it, right? So there's some things that we had in place that were like, this is working fine. And like the work that would go into, changing this process and training
Mhm.
everybody on that is not going to outweigh like the benefit. So I think that was, that's with project processes, with all these like kind of evolving changes, that's something to always keep in mind too, is like it might not be perfect, but where we're at is better, or right now more important than like trying to like go back to the drawing board and rebuild this whole system.
Definitely, definitely. Might there be a better way? Might it save a few extra minutes? Maybe, but in that moment, sometimes the juice just isn't worth the squeeze, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So, a couple of big takeaways I think I want everybody to have who's watching this or will watch this is one, sometimes small changes can make really big impacts when it comes to a project management tool, even your workflows in general. And then two, and I think you said it just so beautifully too, is just really understanding like from a high level workflow, what are we trying to accomplish? What does this look like? How are we moving this through? And then from there, getting just practical on what tasks need to be put in place and how we can effectively manage our workload in a project management tool. Is there anything else you want to share with agency owners? Because I just know so many have very similar struggles to varying degrees with their project management tool and some of that visibility stuff. Is there anything you would want to share or let them know?
Yeah, I mean, don't ignore process. I think that's because it's so easy to just like fly
Yeah.
by the seat of your pants and keep things going, especially when you're super busy and you feel
Mhm.
overwhelmed. But you know, again, prioritization, but like there is so much value in like documenting the processes and defining how you want things to work. So, I think as creatives, a lot of times, agency owners or creative people, they kind of like bump up against the idea of having process. But I think that process is what frees you up to be creative when get these steps in place. And then I think, you know, making this making this like a an open and collaborative process too. So ultimately, obviously, there's certain individuals that are going to make the final decision, but making sure you're getting your team's input is so important because you're not able to really think through all of the different perspectives and all the nuances of each of the steps. So making sure that you're still, considering your team's input is super important to like get to the closest you can get in V1 to like where you're gonna, end up being with it. So
Mhm.
I think that's really a key piece too, because you want your team to be bought into the processes. You want to make sure that you're um, they're they're on board and it makes sense and it's going to work for them too.
Absolutely. And sometimes, if they are the person doing the work, they have a lot of value to add to that process as well. So I totally agree. Having the team involved is super important. Well, thank you so much, Karen, for joining me. For those who are listening and are curious to know more about Radiant Marketing, where could someone find out more about you and your business?
Yeah, they could go to our website, radiantmarketingaz.com, or they can find us on social from there too. So
Mhm.
happy to, have another conversation if agency owners are, curious. But thank you so much, Melissa, for having me on. I've missed meeting and talking with you. So this was a
Oh,
nice little catch up too.
absolutely. Yes, I really enjoyed working with you and the whole team at Radiant. You guys are doing amazing work, and to be able to support you so that you can support more in your way and in a bigger way is just very special to me. So thank you so much. Be sure to connect with both of us on LinkedIn. Bye.
Thank you.